Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have a deck that was not created by me, but was created by a user named Freddybabes, and they used this deck to hit Infinite in 3 days after the season started, and I can attest that during their climb, I faced them about 3 or 4 times, using various different lists and different ideas, just brewing some stuff for my content, and I lost every single time. The first time I saw this list, I thought it was going to be rather weak. I saw some things like Iron Fist and Calling Wing discarding Swarm, and I thought it was going to be just a standard discard list with a little bit of move component, and I think I proactively snapped thinking it was just going to be a weak playline, but the more you look at the list, the more cohesive you can see that it is. Everything that it wants to do, it does very, very well. And the idea behind the list is that it wants to keep tempo, but not be so greedy that it puts itself within Shang-Chi range. If you notice, none of the cards, even the Vulture after 1 movement, is not going to be able to be Shang-Chi'd. And then we have counters to big, strong meta decks right now. So Thanos, we have Killmonger to destroy the stones. We have Shang-Chi to destroy big cards or Shuri buffed cards. We have Cosmo to stop Galactus playlines. We also have Arrow and Polaris as sub-counters to Galactus playlines, depending on what we have in hand and what we have access to. Arrow is also just a phenomenal finisher overall, because if you can put a read on what your opponent is going to play or where, you can displace those cards, and a lot of times you can just win on Arrow alone. And then with all of these kind of small movement components, we have Miles Morales, which becomes a 1-cost 5 power to continue to allow you to push for tempo. And overall, the deck works incredibly well for where we're at in the meta. If we find that Shuri decks are going to start running armor again, or Cosmos to stop those big counterplays from the opponent, maybe they can start squeezing their way in. But otherwise, every single deck that I've ran up against has felt winnable depending on what my draws were. And so with the brief deck explanation out of the way, we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. I'll also leave a link to all of Freddy's socials in the description below. He created the deck, he streams, he creates YouTube content. So if you want to see more, definitely check him out in the description below. All right, so first up we have Kane. The first location is Titan. We do have our Iron Fist, but we don't necessarily want to rush him out on the board. Every once in a while, we might want to drop an Iron Fist and an Arrow on the last turn to push some power into a different lane while pulling the opponent's resources out of that lane. And so they drop a Sunspot. We do have Killmonger to be able to counter that at some point. I think we might go ahead and play our Iron Fist. That way we can do Polaris on 3. We'll go ahead and push it into some other lane. That will allow us to do our Killmonger and our Miles on 4 to be able to start swinging that tempo in our favor. And so they go ahead and skip. They let their Sunspot absorb some energy, which is it's perfectly fine. The more he absorbs, as long as he's not protected by an armor, and we're going to be able to make sure that he's not, potentially with the Polaris, the more he absorbs, the better swing we're going to get from it. I'm going to go ahead and play Vulture into the Tinker's Workshop. We're going to push him over to the side if we need to pull Sunspot out. So if there's an armor here, then we can make that happen. Otherwise, we're just going to play the Vulture. He'll start getting buffed up. And then now we can play 2 cards here. So following the Shuri play, I think most often they're going to skip and try to do something like a Red Skull or a cheap She-Hulk. And so I don't think they're going to play into the Vault this turn. So I'm going to bet on that. We're going to play players into the Tinker's Workshop that will pull the Sunspot over. And then if they're wanting to go with the Arnim Zola play path, they won't be able to do that either. And then we do have our Shang-Chi, so if they play a large card in mid, in the vault, they do the Typhoid Mary, which is fine. We have 1 more turn to play there, and so we have initiative because we have the left and the right lane. We can just go ahead and play our Shang-Chi, and we'll be able to take that away. They probably have a Taskmaster, and depending on where they play it, it might make it difficult. So we're not in a position to snap necessarily. We should be able to win the vault. But winning that last lane might come down to if we can pull our Arrow or not. If we can top deck our Arrow, we can force that last card or the last couple of cards they play into particular lanes. But it's really dependent on what we pick. Ooh, so the Arnim Zola, because of Titan, creates a really, really big monster play here. The good thing is that they've already lost the vault. And so now they're going to have to spread their power out between the left and the right lane. Is it enough? I don't know. But this is whatever they play right after the Shuri is going to be massive. So maybe they could have like a 0 and a Taskmaster. I guess the 0 would only be 12. And so, I mean, it's still a 24 power play. That's still massive. but I want to see it play out. They haven't snapped, so it's an interesting enough play line. Just in case they stack them, I guess I'm going to play both the Killmonger and the Calling Wing into the far right lane. And so they play one card into the left. Is it an, if it's an Odin, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they played in the left lane. I'm sure it's massive. The 28 power arrow, which I'm guessing they were wanting to absorb some additional power with their Sunspot, but the Killmonger coming down took the Sunspot out of play. We were able to win middle and far right, even though they had the monster arrow in the left lane. So we will take those 2 cubes. I wasn't confident enough because this is a fairly flexible deck. We didn't have our counterplays that we would necessarily want in this scenario, but we will absolutely take the 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Chun-Li, and the first location is Necrotia. We could play our Iron Fist out early, but it doesn't give us any value right now. We don't have miles that we want to reduce by moving a card. We don't have our Vulture that's going to get buffed up. We don't know what the lanes are going to look like. And so I'm actually just going to skip the Iron Fist. We're going to play the Lizard naturally. Ooh, so they're still going Zabu. So it could be, and most likely what I've seen Zabu in recently is the kind of Sarah counter deck. And this list continues to shine up against that because none of our cards get above that 8 power range, which is really, really beneficial for us. We could do Polaris to pull their Zabu over into the Eternity range. We could do Iron Fist. Nah, we don't want to do Iron Fist this turn. We're going to try moving their cards over into Eternity range. We want them to lose that lane. It'll take up a little bit of their extra space. Ooh, no, so it's the Zabu Mr. Negative, which is a little bit greedier. It has a higher high roll, a higher ceiling, but we do have some counterplays to try to avoid their high roll. So if it is the Black Panther version, which is the most common one I've seen, we could do a Cosmo to stop that Wong lane from having the Arnim Zola. We could do an arrow to pull their Arnim Zola out of that lane on the last turn. Just a lot of ways that we could play that one. So I think we're going to play our Iron Fist and our Vulture. Typically, we want to stay under Shang-Chi range, but since it's a Mr. Negative deck, I'm a little bit more comfortable in having something above that 9 power range. And so we're going to push the Vulture into the Bifrost. The Bifrost is going to push it right back. And so that is instantly a plus 10 to the Vulture, which he's such a powerhouse unit whenever you move him once or twice. It is phenomenal, the value that he can bring. So I think we're just going to run Killmonger here. That will take out our Iron Fist, which isn't great for us, but we have a really commanding lead in the Eternity range. What I want to be able to do is have Cosmo just in case they play, let's say, a Wong here, or they play a Black Panther. I want to be able to play the Cosmo to counter it. And so since we have initiative, we're going to be able to do the Cosmo, and then we can play our Calling Wing to the left to try to swing or sneak that location away. If they don't play like an Arnim Zola or something here, then we can still swing this location with just the Cosmo play, and I think we'll be able to sneak this game out with the Cosmo counter, which is why we held it towards the end. It's not the most mana efficient, but knowing what kind of matchup we're facing, we're able to choose what cards we let the opponent know that we have or have in hand, or the cards that are out on the board so that we can strategically use them when we need to. Well, that doesn't feel as satisfying now. I'm guessing they maybe disconnected? I don't know. They didn't play anything on the last turn, so we were able to get the 2 cubes instead of the 1. We'll take it, but I don't feel good about that one. Next up, we have Epsilon Knot. The first location is Muir Island again, it was the first location in the last match that we played. But we do get the Calling Wing and the Swarm value this game, which doesn't always happen, but when it does, it is a huge kind of boom or boost to your just overall power push, because then we can either save the swarms, we can play them out early into Muir Island to get that +1 every single turn on them. We have some flexibility in the options that we can play. So we got a Professor X from the Daily Bugle. So I don't know for sure what they're running. We can pull their armor out of Muir Island over into the Stark Tower lane if we want to. We could pull it over into the Daily Bugle lane. I think I'm going to play one of our swarms. I don't think we're going to need both. I think one is going to be enough, and then I'll save the other one for kind of like a tactical card that we can play or drop whenever we need to. So we move their armor. Is this something that might end up being able to be destroyed? The Cosmo, interesting. Interesting that it's the Cosmo playline. This could be a destroyer game, And if so, we can pull their destroyer into Stark Tower, and we just win off of that by itself. I'm going to play Miles Morales into the Daily Bugle. We're going to go ahead and continue to kind of support our... Actually, let's go ahead and play Killmonger into Stark Tower. Just in case they want to or try to do a cheeky Professor X lock, we're going to at least push value into Stark Tower so they can't do that easily. And so they have a swarm that comes down that they created from the Daily Bugle. And then Ant-Man in the far left lane is interesting. So this is probably a Spectrum Destroyer deck. We can try to lock down the left lane, but then if they have their Spectrum, that becomes really difficult for us to finalize and win that game. We can do Professor X into a swarm here. We can then do Iron Fist and Arrow on the last turn to pull their last turn card play over into Stark Tower. We'll push our Arrow to give us some additional value in Muir Island, maybe. I don't know. I think we can win the Daily Bugle lane. I think they're going to play into Stark Tower or Muir Island here, but I don't think they will do both. And so the Professor X lock in Muir Island does come down. Unfortunately, that means that we're going to have to fight for the Stark Tower lane, which actually that's fine. They can't do Destroyer. I mean, they could do Destroyer, but we're going to have 9 additional power here. It's going to push us up to 19. They do Destroyer, that's only 15. Yeah, they're going to have to retreat out. We're able to outpower both play lines, both the Spectrum and the Destroyer, and so we're able to use their Professor X against them, lock them out of the game, and we will take the retreat. That is 3 in a row. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next game. Next up, we have Day OK. The first location is Muir Island, so if we can get there, if we can get cards there early, then we're going to be able to get quite a bit of benefit. I am going to go ahead and play our Iron Fist on turn 1. A lot of times I like to hold that just as a strategic kind of turn 3 play or turn 4 play along with Vulture, or to push our cards into harder to reach locations. But I think because of Muir Island, I want to play it out early. And since we had Calling Wing, if we drew into Swarm there, we'd be able to play Calling Wing on 2. Since we don't, we're actually going to hold Calling Wing. Calling Wing, unless we have Swarm, is most of the time just going to be more of a last turn supplemental play along with like a Shang-Chi or a Miles Morales, something to give additional value. Ooh, and actually, this is beautiful. I learned this combo from Freddy himself. We matched up. It was a mirror match. He was playing this deck. I was testing out this deck. And if you run Iron Fist in Vulture into the Bar Sinister, it will push the Vulture out, it will buff up to 8, and then it'll create 4 8-power copies of Vulture in Bar Sinister. And so they're all below Shang-Chi range. It gives you a lot of tempo value. It's just really a fantastic playline. And if you were curious, he absolutely destroyed me in the mirror match, which is, I think, how it should go. I mean, he created the deck. He is the master. He knows the best playlines for it. We're just trying to pick it up and do well with it for what we have. And so we do have the 32 power in Bar Sinister, which is, it's pretty formidable. And then that also gives us the 8 power in the Bifrost. And then now we can do something like Miles Morales and Polaris that will pull over into Muir Island. They will get buffed up one time and then get pushed over into the Bifrost. We could have also positioned the Vulture so that he bumped over to Muir Island and then bounced back, but that would put him within Shang-Chi range. And that's what we want to avoid with this deck. We want to get enough value and enough tempo that we can win those lanes, but not enough that it becomes an issue where we might end up getting Shang-Chi'd and having that big tempo swing played against us. And so we do have an Arrow for the last turn if that's what we end up wanting to go with, which I think the way that it looks, I think it will be. It's either that or our Shang-Chi. I'm going to play Lizard into the left lane. Right now we have a really good lead in the Bar Sinister and the Bifrost. If we can keep that tempo here, then on the last turn, all we have to do is play Arrow. But they do play into Bar Sinisters. Ooh, so they get the Carnage, which is really going to be big. That's going to create a lot of destruction, a lot of death on their end. And so I assume that this is going to be a wave and that this is a death wave deck. And if we can keep tempo, then we can actually pull all of their cards over into Muir Island and out Arrow what I assume is their... No, it's not a wave. Wow, okay. So all the Carnages, it's just a 6 power and just a 20 power and nothing in mid. It's just the She-Hulk in the left. And so they'll have a free death here and then maybe Arrow. But since we have Arrow, since we have initiative, we're going to be able to pull it over. And if I was playing this outside of recording, I would snap here. I don't like snapping on turn 6. But right now is just about the time where I got a very solidly read on what they were playing. And so I would snap and they would probably retreat. It's just a tactical, I mean, it's quadrupling the cubes that you could potentially lose from just retreating. And so it's a very smart play if you can retreat on that last turn after an opponent snaps. So I always like to snap between turns 3 and 4 typically, once I know the locations, once I have a read on what the opponent's playing. But in this scenario, if I was by myself, I would snap just to make them uncomfortable and probably retreat out. Ooh, so they do end up not retreating. So we're getting the 1 extra cube here. We should. They played the Shang-Chi, they played the Death, but we're going to keep and sustain our lead in the middle and the far right lane. They can have the left lane. They can have as much power there as they want because we will take the other 2. We will take our 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Mr. Slantastic. The first location is the Dark Dimension, so we can hide like our Maximus there. If we end up wanting to. I think we're going to skip here. We don't have any key targets to move. We could use Iron Fist into maybe a swarm, but not knowing if we want to go that route or not. I don't know. We're going to play Iron Fist into Kunlun. Now, if we do Maximus into Dark Dimension, that won't trigger Iron Fist's ability, so he'll stay there. He'll be hidden. Then we can use turn 4 to use one of our cards to move into Kunlun. That will get an extra +2. So if it is the Vulture, then that does put him at a +10, so we have to be cautious or cognizant that that is a potential counterplay that they're going to end up doing. So since we top decked into Vulture, I was going to do Maximus into Dark Dimension, but I say we go ahead and do the Vulture play. That way we can do both Maximus and Spider-Man or Miles Morales on turn 4 for a little bit bigger power swing. Plus we get the huge value on Vulture, just absolutely absurd value. Kunlun is just so good whenever you have a movement card or a package of movement cards, but the most consistent is just like a one-off kind of movement. And so we're just going to hide Maximus into the Dark Dimension. We're going to play Miles Morales over to the right into Wakanda, and we do have one of our counter cards. We have Shang-Chi. They take out our Polaris, so we can't move their cards around the board. They drop their Killmonger. I assume Death at some point, but Arrow is going to be the master at helping us find our win condition. I almost think we stack into these 2 lanes, but at the same time, if they have an arrow of their own, which a lot of times Death Wave decks do have arrow, if they have an arrow of their own, they could use it over here and it would pull our arrow out of the Dark Dimension, or we could use arrow into Dark Dimension, but we might lose initiative and have our cards pulled over. I think we're going to go Swarm into Dark Dimension. We're going to do Lizard into Kunlun, and we're going to try to sneak our arrow. Ooh, beautiful. So they skipped on turn 5. That means a She-Hulk and a Taskmaster. We're going to have the win here. They don't have anything over here. Just an easy read. And most of the time I'd snap here or the turn before. With the arrow play and moving them over, we have initiative. Unless they can go wide, and even then, I don't think that is enough for them to find a win condition. So they do 2 cards here. She-Hulk, Taskmaster should be a pretty common play line. She-Hulk, the She-Hulk and the arrow, very interesting. They were going to try and yank our cards. So us playing around the potential arrow play did turn out to be useful because if we had tried to sneak our arrow over here, theirs would have revealed first and pulled ours over, and it would have been much less impactful. But we will take those cubes. But in this uncertain meta where there are just all kinds of different decks and variations, that is 5 games in a row. This list is incredibly consistent. It does what it wants to do very, very well. And so I would definitely recommend checking this list out before it is all over the place, because this is very, very strong. Anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.